Have you met Nelson Mandela in person?
I'm too young, I think partly. No, I haven't. I mean, Nelson Mandela was many things. One is, I think he was an asset to the ANC, so he was well guarded. He was our international link. Uh, and so I actually think, to be honest, he's far more, he's better appreciated across these borders than here.
Have you ever wondered what it takes to break free from the confines of your past and rise to unprecedented heights? Welcome to second episode of season 2 of the Blaze Goldburst Show. Today we are thrilled to have Dr. Quinton W. Simpson, author of Apartheid of the Heart. Dr. Quinton W. Simpson, a distinguished business growth analyst, hails from South Africa. His journey from a small town upbringing during the heart of apartheid to earning a doctorate and excelling in the corporate world is nothing short of inspiring. To learn more about the podcast, visit blazegoldburst.com. Support Dr. Quinton's efforts by sharing this video and subscribing to the channel. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Blaze Goldburst Show, Dr. Quinton W. Simpson.
Thank you very much.
So let us begin. What inspired you to write this book and share your journey?
Well, firstly, my journey is I'm a South African. Culturally, I'm a colored person. That means I'm mixed race. My languages are Afrikaans and English. I grew up in the apartheid system. I went to university when apartheid was still practiced, and my escalation into the corporate world was as a result of sponsorship by apartheid. So it meant it was very meaningful to me, and then my current debates and issues that I have with it is the result of apartheid. So it's been very much part of my life as a policy and as a consequence.
How has your mother's influence shaped the perspectives you share in the book?
So my mother worked during the apartheid era as a shoe salesperson, and her boss was a white lady, and a boss had access to a credit card that was only allowed white people to use it. Right? It was called a Samba card. Non-white people couldn't access it. But her boss gave her access to buy clothing for 3 children and to pay access to money to pay their school fees and so on. So my mother was able to put aside emotional views so that she could raise her children, and for me that's a standard by which I live my life. My opinions are objective. I certainly try to have the objective. I'm a human, but I'm fortunate that I'm skilled as an auditor, so I have a great awareness of issues of corporate governance and standards and so on. And I'm also very spiritual, so I have a great understanding of spiritual standards. And for that reason, I think my mother's influence in my life is to look beyond the emotional debate that I have with myself.
Okay. So the next question is, can you share a moment when you realized the depth of apartheid of the heart?
When I saw the increase of poverty as a result of people who grew up as recipients of the apartheid policy, and 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 who are now practicing it, and as a result, see an enormous increase on their own kind in poverty. They've not been able to eradicate any form of literacy issues. Instead, they practicing the very same form of apartheid in another format under another name, but the principle is the same: gain by a few at the cost of others.
What role did spirituality play in overcoming the challenges of apartheid?
Firstly, spirituality, we would all know that speaks to issues of standards that are laid for a greater cause, greater than our own selfish survival, physical survival in many ways. I'm very shocked that many politicians who govern us and many leaders do not even know the principle of, of the human, it's mind, body, and soul. So they don't understand it. So spirituality, if you understand it completely and you practice it, does secure you another day in a very difficult situation. Knowing that at some point there'll be a togetherness that will bring about a greater sentiment towards a unified standard. And but you're also aware that, minus the emotional context of it, that you have to go through a country that's in many ways spiritually poor as much as it is physically poor.
How did growing up in a segregated society shape your identity?
Firstly, I don't think what he did was, in the absence of adequate access to the minimum standards of a good life, we were still able to have a good enough life as a community, and the reason for that was that we had our own cultural standards that allowed us to prevail in the absence of access to a greater economy or a greater social life. And it was enough to keep us afloat and to remaining positive. We knew a new day was coming. We were promised that.
You describe apartheid as evolving into apartheid of the heart. How do you define this new form?
I call it apartheid of the heart because the people who are practicing apart or legalized segregation and prejudice are the very same people who fought against it. If they now come because of the success of the original apartheid, and one can argue that, but it was very successful. If you ask me why now, if you look at the white community in South Africa who form part of the minorities, I'm one of them, white, Indian, and colored minority groups in South Africa. They are extremely wealthy. They have generational wealth. And so apartheid was very, very successful for them. Now you have a new government who comes into being, and they want to seize the day because they know the democratic system only allows them to sit in seats of power for a period of time, 4 years or 5 years. And so they have to, they're very opportunistic about it. And so they maximize the access that they have for the gain of themselves, for self-gain. What is very interesting about it is that under apartheid, the original apartheid, which was practiced by the Nationalist Party, the policies were written in a way that separated people. So these people were very intentional and they were truthful. Apartheid of the heart, for me, is when people lie. They write the greatest policies, the greatest policies that the world has ever seen, the greatest constitutions. And then they go and break their own rules because their rules are set to have humanity, to speak to equality and equal access, even to a large degree forgiveness. And then they they walk away from the consequences because they themselves struggle to become who they are because of the consequences of the original apartheid. But they repeat that, and their own people are suffering. That is apartheid.
What are the lasting impacts of apartheid policies on South African society today?
I think we far more segregated today than we ever were. Uh, I think it's become a bit more dynamic. We have far more. There are many more different uh, cultures here. People coming from neighboring countries for greater lives. So that's a very interesting thing to see. But South Africa is an angry country. It's an angry country because of a sense of entitlement. Firstly, the leaders feel they're entitled to abuse current policies and for their self gain within the period that they rule. And in doing so, they've misled the poor and promised them um, and things that make them feel entitled. And as a result, you don't. There's an expectation. Oh, almost like people are waiting because over a period of 30 years, we haven't seen literacy rates go up. We've seen unemployment go up instead. We have 60% of our youth unemployed. We have standard unemployment at 40%. The per capita income that's good enough to live a good life sits with a group of people that are about only 2 million South Africans out of about arguably about 65 to 70 million people. Put the bill on taxes because the rest of the South African population is entitled. They haven't been skilled to access good enough jobs to pay good enough taxes. So the very same people who the government blame are the very same people who build the cities. The new government hasn't built anything. The white man still pays the taxes in the majority of it. It owns all the corporate companies. In 30 years, I haven't seen a noticeable black-owned corporate rise being erected, being stable, being employing groups of people of all cultures. Instead, what I do see is white-owned businesses being shocked to practice BEE, which is a form of apartheid, to hire people on the basis of their skin color.
Do you believe affirmative action policies have achieved their intended goals? Why or why not?
Well, unfortunately, like I said before, I'm a beneficiary of affirmative action. I acquired many degrees and so on. And my degrees were funded by the fact that I showed the level of promise. The corporate companies paid for it, of which I worked for once government, partly government-owned entity. And they paid for my education. So affirmative action made me who I am. So I'm grateful for that. But I look at the narrative of apartheid or affirmative action since its inception and since its inception and since its legalization and since it become a law enacted. It's become more than a process that is meant to fix a problem. It has become a problem unto itself. So affirmative action for me, no matter where it's applied, is nothing more than an intervention. it is meant to address inequality where it's experienced, whether in the workplace or in a country as a whole. But it cannot go beyond its contracted period to address the issue that has been identified, because otherwise it becomes reverse apartheid in this case. I mean, South Africa is not only known for Chris Bana doing the first heart transplant and Elon Musk now owning the world, and is from here. But we're also known for creating the term apartheid, which is literally just prejudice that's legalized.
How has the African National Congress handled post apartheid governance?
So, firstly, I'm very fluent in corporate governance, and corporate governance is a leadership term. It's meant to bring together a set of standards that have been walked through, tested for resilience and compatibility and relevance. And it brings out the better part of our best day as humans, because we're both good and bad. And so it then becomes a standard by which we judge. Policing is done on it, and so on. But in the case of
African
the ANC, the African National Congress, the standards that have been set is brilliant on paper, because it takes into account the consequences of the past, but it opportunistically also takes into account the excess that compliance to globally set standards will bring. Because if you are compliant to the standard, it means that you agreeing to ideologies that's driven by the West, and so you're compliant, and so you get the excess. Because apartheid wasn't defeated by a white man looking in the mirror and feeling bad about it. There's nothing to feel bad about if your coffers are overflowing with money. It was stopped because of pressure by the West. And so when the leadership standards that have been laid by the South African government means compliance to Western ideologies, and it gives access. And maybe when these things were said, they didn't really believe in it, or they didn't really mean it. And so, and if you're not going to form or follow any Western practice in your leadership, which is meant to be driven by values, then you should still develop an ideology that is equal to representing the best of human behavior.
Okay. What is your take on the role of cultural integration in modern South Africa?
Yeah, very interesting, because I mean, firstly, I'm mixed race. So I have a little bit of European blood in me. I have local blood in me, and so on. So I'm always like, what is going on? The cultural diversity is important, because a nation that can incorporate different types and different views into a common standard is a solid nation. And without that ability, it means a direct segregation, direct exclusion. It means that as leadership, you become weak, because if you can't manage the dynamic of an all-inclusive society, it means that you can only deal with what you're comfortable with, which means you're not a leader. I believe all philosophies grant for us to acknowledge that we have equal right to a good life. And somebody was talking to me the other day and said, why is this particular person living a good life? Because he is not practicing good good standards. And I said, because the sun, that's what my philosophical context is. I'm Christian and I believe in all faiths. You will find it. It says the sun shines on both the bad and the good.
You critique the broad based black economic empowerment. What alternative policies would you suggest?
Anything that doesn't deal with human emotions, with a demand for immediate gratification. Apartheid was in existence for a long period of time. In order to get out of it, it was always going to be a long period of time. Responsible leadership would have understood that they may not be that generation who would uh, label themselves as marionettes after sitting in a position of power for 5 years. They would have understood that the process of dealing with the consequences of apartheid and setting up a new way of life for all South Africans would have been a long-term process. And that process would have had consequences of a new form of sentiment, which meant that people over a period of 30 years would have started believing that they are good enough, because what apartheid does, it breaks you down philosophically, psychologically. So they would have believed, their children would have believed that. There would have been enough time. There would have, one of the huge differences that you would have seen, you would have, for example, from a business perspective, you would have seen more small, medium-sized businesses running successfully, exporting into the rest of Africa. Because if the West at the point in time saw South Africa as a good country to trade with because of its stability, its processes, and so on, and as an entry point to the rest of Africa, so would we have been to the rest of Africa. But now, because we lost out on that opportunity, there was a need for immediate gratification by a few. There's a regress. There's the community hasn't developed to a point where they can dump entitlement and replace it with skills, and which allow them to access opportunities. So it would have been a longer term view, which would have addressed issues of socio-economic upliftment. It wouldn't, in my view, leaders would have had to say immediate gratification is not on the cards here. The generations to come will build, we lay the foundation, wealth will be built on our shoulders. They were not willing to be the anchor for anybody else to follow.
Okay. Why do you think the African National Congress has failed to deliver on its promises to the marginalized communities?
Because of the taste of money. I think there must have been a sincere attempt to fight, and certainly did with the help of the West, to fight against apartheid as it was at the time. I think the immaturity as political leadership, the taste of money, the selfish, it almost like they departed away from the rest of the community and just started focusing on themselves. So I think for me, the main thing is it is an immature government. It needed some time. It's a young country when they came into power, because a lot of the mature, experienced government officials were white, obviously, because the government is white. And these people were replaced at a pace that maybe made sense, but with it, a lot of standards started deteriorating, and there wasn't a end over time. It's the same with the previous question that you asked me. There was a race to get into power, to get to the money, and to get the people who were leading us out of the way. Uh, and yet there were processes which were charged by people like Nelson Mandela that brought everybody together to discuss issues of nation building. And there was agreements made. And I think the ANC then went against it when they saw if we had to stay within a government of unity, which included these experienced people who would have then demanded a longer term view of wealth, the sharing of wealth. That was not going to be. And that is what we sitting with today.
Have you met Nelson Mandela in person?
I'm too young, I think, partly. No, I haven't. I mean, Nelson Mandela was many things. One is, I think he was an asset to the ANC, so he was well guarded. He was our international link. And so I actually think, to be honest, he's far more, he's better appreciated across these borders than here.
Do you believe that apartheid's legacy could have been addressed differently? How?
If it was accepted as part of our cultural inheritance as a unit, in order to progress and to make sense of your own life, you have to firstly accept who you are. And for me to deny a part of yourself, because we're not talking about an individual, we're talking about a country. If you go into a place where young people go to a university there, which is regarded as one of the top universities on the African continent, and they break down cultural statues and which reflect maybe elements of time periods within the apartheid period, the heightened part of it. I would say that means that you're denying yourself. You can just grow stronger if you accept yourself holistically. And I think by denying who you are takes away from your strength.
What is your response to critics who may view your stance as too harsh on current governance?
Firstly, I feel that they must be blind. There's a bridge between Kailicha, which is a black community, and one of the world's most expensive pieces of land, which is Stellenbosch, where you potentially have 5 or so, that's what I was told, billionaires living. And if you see that, then I would argue that that reality is not a picture that I'm painting, is as a reality that you're experiencing. And over 30 years, you have not built a sentiment of belief that would allow those people in those houses to accept that over a period of time, through processes of educating yourself, the generations to come would get closer to Stellenbosch and occupy without force, at the same standard, at the same level, those houses, and be neighbors of our previous rulers and oppressors. Instead, you've created a sense of entitlement, which now gets our people to go into socio-economic, to subject themselves to severe socio-economic problems. You don't want to know the end of it. And set up structures and live in unruly communities just to have access to work. And that work is working for the same white people that they dislike. And so for me, in 30 years, No positive belief has been built. No person has the right level of belief that him and his family um, have a process that was undertaken that will lead to sustainable, and that for me is the greatest uh, taking with a group of people working and they're entitled and there's nothing coming.
Do you think South Africa has regressed under the policies of the ANC?
Well, yes, I think firstly, racism is higher than before, uh, potentially at its highest. Um, Black economic empowerment has created a hierarchy of people. It has set the standard of what a human being should look like and what language he should speak, what color his skin should be to have optimal access to economical opportunity. It has systems of giving access to students to medical schools and so on, based on the same standard. So there you have it. So from a human to human perspective, uh, Black economic empowerment has increased the negative feelings between the different cultural groups. And that is not good for nation building. That's the first thing. The second thing is through a process of of neglecting and negating uh, their responsibilities. Uh, our government, and I must say our government up until this point, has given away, technically speaking, our cities. Our cities are under great threat of completely falling into third world situations. In many cases, they have already. The city of Johannesburg physically is one of the biggest cities in Africa. The inner city part, there's a lot of development taking place. And that for that, we have, once again, the white man's vision to be grateful for. It keeps building new towns and new things and keeps going. But the inner city of Johannesburg, which was given, which is managed by the city council, the metro of Johannesburg, is you can't go in there. It's crime has taken over. Uh, it's the same like in your house. If you don't clean your house, you'll have all these insects, and you at some point you can't go into your own home again. And so our cities are nowhere close to where they've been. I think from a systems perspective and participation in the fourth industrial revolution, I think we still there because we have two countries in one. One is very efficient and smart, under great threat, of course, due to loss of affirmative action. And then the other part, which is receiving and not investing well. And so I think the government also under new government, the investments has been more of a maintenance perspective. And if you look, the cities haven't been well maintained, but the investment has been more of a maintenance perspective. There's no new cities built. There's no smart cities built. So there's no upliftment in the expectation that any African country has of its SMEs. In Africa, most countries, most people on the African continent, minus the North, they self-employed. South Africans were schooled to be employed. We were brought up in the Western way, but during the last 30 years, one should have embraced the fact that the economy can only take up so many people. So the alternative would have been to empower non-white people through funding and so on. to enable them to become self-trade, and for the SFE sector then to take up far more people into employment, or for these people to become their own SMMEs. That didn't help. And so there's no growth in the ability to uptake more people into employment, because where we're sitting is that under this government, a greater group of people are expecting the same number. Here, there are some new faces that you see on the stock exchange, but the same number of corporates to give employment to a larger group of people, because our community has grown substantially. And that is the legacy that the ANC is leaving behind.
You emphasize personal responsibility amidst systemic oppression. How do you reconcile the two?
Firstly, I know that everything is of a passing nature. The Roman Empire has fallen. At some point, Rome fell. America will fall. It's the way of the world. But mankind stays the same. And so, and governance and rulership and leadership and power come from man. And so what man has created at some point need to be washed away, because we keep creating things that are not sustainable, because we drive and create societies that are based on an ideology may please leadership at the time, capitalism, whatever you may call it. It's elitist. I'm not against capitalism. I'm schooled in capitalism. I'm just saying all these policies impress upon our minds that we have to get to a certain level of operation in society so that we have greater access. And then the poor become the consumers. So for me, when I think of why do I press upon myself, given the situations in which I find myself, why do I press upon myself to be a better human? Because situations of a passing nature, I dictate my own reality through my thinking and through what I know is wrong and right. Two wrongs don't make it right. Affirmative action don't make it right that the white man had apartheid. If the ANC chose a more progressive stance, even, and that's what the question is to, why do I remain tough on myself? Because a tough me can overcome any situation. I would be creative enough to find a path or bridge over that situation. And sometimes it means that I have to go away to be appreciated, and then dictate from a distance for the gain of those that are left behind. So there's so many ways of changing scenarios. You don't have to sit and suck up everything. You must. Creativity is an inspiration to yourself and to the people in the environments in which you find yourself. You may have to go away and inspire others to come back as a collective to help the people that you left behind. And so I'm tough on myself because I keep reading, I keep learning, I keep writing, I keep reading, and I develop my own ideologies because I believe authenticity is at a level comparable to love. You know, it's I don't know which is better. You know, all I do know, if you authentic and if you believe in the principle of leadership starts at home with yourself. Oh man, for me, what I see in the South African government, the current government, is that leadership, which is meant to focus on the issues in your home where you are meant to lead, is instead worried about issues between Palestine and Israel. And it's fine. We're all concerned about the world as a whole. But if poverty prevails and you are in a position of power with billions of South African rands or trillions of South African rands, which come from foreign direct investment in the main, this country has not been able to export more or create greater GDP through other practices besides waiting for foreign direct investment. So if you practice sensationalism, it means that you seek an image which you would want to use to impress others with for a gain that only you understand. Because the right thing to do is, if you want to lead the world, Mother Teresa said it, go home and love your family.
What does freedom mean to you in the context of your life experiences?
Freedom means access to the comfort that you choose for yourself. That comfort may not be comparable to a neighbor, but is what you seek. Freedom means living amongst a group of people that would allow you that comfort. And the only thing that keeps you away from that is if the collective views that comfort to be irrelevant and unholy as an impact on the group. Yeah. If it's not a norm that has become accepted, but if it's accepted, then freedom means the comfort to pursue it. Whether it speaks to your choices of life or mine only, but as long as I have access to what we agreed is a set of standards of things that, are acceptable.
Can hatred and prejudice truly be eradicated, or are they inevitable aspects of human nature?
So firstly, I think we let me start with positive. We are good and bad. If we orientate and discipline our minds, we can be a lamb for making light, which is what life is about, making life for a group of people beyond yourself. Because if you make that light for yourself, you didn't get to the meaning of life. You haven't matured, and if you have to pass through this life and never get to that, your life would have been a total waste. And with this, as per me, and if it takes falling from grace, imprisonment, and whatever to get you to that point, no matter what you have lost, you would have gained. Yeah. The negative of obviously is the other side of it, where you understand that the consequences of our decisions are what we should be mindful of, because it has an impact on life greater than our own existence. It makes life difficult for others, just like being a good person. And so good and bad is a choice, and then it is fed through a process of continuous self-improvement. You need to find yourself in situations where you continue to self-develop, because what you regard as value is where your heart will be. So you need to consistently grow in your mind an idea and an ideology if it escalates to the next level of what is perceived to be value by you. And then your heart will follow there. So the very same person who's good can be bad tomorrow if he doesn't consistently grow himself. Um, the the risk of non-performance can hit you or can materialize at any time. You don't know. You have to consistently want to be the best person that you are. Uh, because if you weak for a moment, you would be caught off guard. I think the ANC were good people when they came into power. Uh, they've rescued a whole nation of the claws of the white man's grip. They used the West to support them through a process of sanctions that brought the white government to its knees. Um, but when it came into power, it it accepted that legalized prejudice is a process to keep the poor enslaved, even if they look exactly like you look. To remind people that because they look slightly different than you, their commitment and loyalty to this country is not good enough. To go into hijacking systems and processes and sentiments that were working to the degree that you would find a politician's child intercepting funding that is meant to go to poor South Africans, funding from international governments, channeling those benefits to their own, and still gaining from their positions and blocking out excess that was even given by others, not even excess coming from government coffers. Other people come and say, we're here to help the poor. Because, sometimes it takes another person to remind you that you're not looking your best today. So others come and say, you're not doing the best of jobs and we want to assist you. And then interjecting and intervening with that help and channeling that to themselves. That is apartheid about. When you have even third party support being hijacked for self gain by leadership who wants to exploit the 5 years that they have in power shamelessly, setting policy based on the consequences that they experienced to compromise their own kind through hierarchical systems of skill-based structures that prevent others the type of access they would have to build good enough lives for their families.
Do you think economic disparity fuels racial tensions in South Africa?
I think it's gone cheaper than that. I think it's economic disparity. An unequal society is subjected to emotional responses because of the conditions under which they live, and that is fair. But I think we've gone to a cheaper level where it's just become ridiculous. How we allowed segregation beyond the economical consequence or the economical reference to compromise our human to human relations. To last degree, I mean, one day I was in an Uber and there was an accident on at the time I was living in Stellenbosch, this place I was telling you about. So I was in the Uber with my 2 children, and it at the time it seemed like there was a collision on the road, an accident, and so the Uber driver decided to drive through Kailicha just to find a shortcut back onto the main road. And I, at the time, didn't believe I was in South Africa. It was a new set of rules. I was in a different country. Uh, I had to stay strong for the sake of my children. Um, and that's the South Africa in which we find ourselves. That the the initial reference to the economic segregation or the economic influence on this segregation has gone to a point where we are living in a way that gets us to, it's almost like we're eating our own flesh as a result of it. I think it's gone to a place the economic reference is putting us apart. And so now we're going to live in a shanty town, but in this town, a new society is created with its own standards. And we imploding. That's the right word that I was looking for. Is that due to these policies and the expectation that a new day will come based on a sense of entitlement, we are imploding in our waiting because it's not coming. What is happening is instead the world is moving along, and the gap between what is regarded as a good enough skill or standard of living is increasing from where the poor man is. And if leadership looks on that and continue to self-enrich, that's apartheid about. When you see your own kind is self-imploding, but you are self-enriching.
How do you view the role of forgiveness in healing the wounds of apartheid?
I think forgiveness, you can never go wrong with forgiveness. I think sincere forgiveness is very powerful. I think the manner in which you speak to your oppressor, the feelings that he feels when he's in your presence, the respect that you have for him as a human being, no matter what he's done. True forgiveness makes him feel that it's part of what the life that you jointly can create. So I think forgiveness had a huge part to play in it. And I think Nelson Mandela understood this. And I think he provided and attempted to provide, him and the leadership with him, attempted to provide a platform in which this leadership would become a sustainable notion, a way of life, a new norm. And I think there was a U-turn made when there was a realization that the funds coming through, it's always about the money. The original apartheid was about the money. It's ownership. It's about the money. The new apartheid is about the money. And for a few, it's always for a few. It's about the money for a few. And so it's a cheap way to steal. You just have to get to the top of many countries it's the same. But here, especially, I don't want to talk about many countries. So forgiveness, I think, was a very strong option for us. And I think because it wasn't meant, but it was meant by the people at the time who led the government. But I think the generation which followed them, they were more opportunistic and they were more money driven. I think that's the one thing, forgiveness. It's very important. But I also think there's another element which is selflessness, which in this case, as we speak about these philosophical elements, if even forgiveness was something they carried in their hearts, but they were not selfish about it. They were selfless for the sake of their children. I mean, we are sitting in the most diverse country on the African continent. We have, I mean, we have about 8 million or so white people. There's about 8 million colored people. There's about 1.8 million Indian people. Um, and the rest of our communities regarded as black. So that in itself shows you that the white man needed the black man as a consumer to become rich. It needed power to access the land and own it and so forth. And it's the same principle that applies here. If you just turn it around and you have the power of the consumer, and you understand that, that already gives you an alternative to BEE. So BEE didn't look at what you have as a non-white community of business people, because you meant to bring in. Donald Trump brings in Elon Musk. So when the black government came in, there must have been some brilliant black person they could have called upon. I know Indians are traders. They could have called upon Indian traders in South Africa. But they didn't. They looked at what the white man had, and they needed to pursue what he had. Affirmative action is all about what the white man has. Creativity is not sparked by pursuing what other people have. Creativity has a life of its own. It needs acceptance that you have the ability, and to be bold and opportunistic about it. It needs faith and belief. If you're the government, you have the consumer pool. The white man's wealth over time, if you allowed affirmative action to stay away or be an incentive, intervention as opposed to a law, after 30 years, you would have been on your way, your children would have been on their way to be equal, even if it took another 30 years. But you would have seen the wealth growing stage by stage, organically. And if you lived long enough, you potentially would live with your child, and he would now live in a mansion or a bigger house. And then you would feel good because you help build a country in which there's a community of rich enough people, or a community with a personal income standard that's regarded as middle class. So it's the mess up is when the policies of apartheid are formulated, both by the previous government and this government. It's formulated from a perspective of here. When our white South Africans came on the ships from Holland or wherever, if they had carried it themselves to say that, we have guns, we have many things, we have spices, let us build the Bushman and the zoo with us, then they wouldn't have had this problem. We would have had one language, one connection or commitment to pursuing an ideology that's common amongst us. We would have been a rich country. So if it's the same with this government, if it went back and said, when our colonizers arrived here, if they had a different sentiment towards wealth creation, and that sentiment was inclusive, they would have been wealthy forever, and they wouldn't have been subjected to punishment at some point by the world. So if we believe that inclusion, and if we are responsible leaders, we then have to say, this is the mistake they made. So we're not going to repeat it. We're going to include everybody, because nobody's going anywhere. We're all Africans, but nobody's going anywhere. It's in fact, the currency is so bad you can't go live in another country now. What does inclusion represent as power? What do we have? Perspective, endurance, and so on. What minerals do we have? What do we have besides what the white man built? But if gold and everything was ignored, there's a chase after what the white man has. That means, are you? Oh, I mean, it's almost sick, isn't it? It's sick. If you want, it's his. He obtained it, but you said you forgave it, but you still want it. You didn't forgive him, and by not forgiving him, you are not allowing yourself to be creative. Therefore, you remain subjected to his power. Therefore, the white man still controls the economy because you haven't created any alternative. There's no black man is less intelligent than a white man. There's more black man wants what the white man has. That's what it is. Yeah.
Do you believe Nelson Mandela's legacy has been misinterpreted or misused?
I think Nelson Mandela and his life speaks for itself. My personal faith as a Christian tells me that you'll be appreciated in foreign lands far away from those uh, that are regarded as your family. And this, I suppose, speaks to many philosophical views. It's not only Christian based, it's life. Um, yes, Nelson Mandela was totally seen for who he is, and what he did, um, and what he continued to do in his freedom and when power was given to him. Uh, the 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 issue for me is the year is abused. His image is abused. It was used. I felt so sorry when Nelson Mandela was old and he was dragged to ANC rallies. The man couldn't even walk anymore. He couldn't even talk anymore. He was old. He needed to rest. He needed some time with his family. He spent 27 years in prison. After that, he had to work so hard to fight the consequences of attacks by the white on the white government, sanctions and so on, to bring back foreign investment, which he did a great job on. But the current government used him, then sent through a sentiment amongst the young that he sold out this country, which is so sad to see. And that's the nice thing about potentially being a minority. I'm not emotionally involved. But Nelson Mandela is a Xhosa man. He comes from the Xhosa tribe. All these tribalism views that, in many ways, wanted to reduce his impact on the world. Luckily for you, me, Nelson Mandela, and many other people, the world has gone so small through the fourth industrial revolution, the third industrial revolution, all these things. You can't, that's why Hollywood is shrinking. Everything is shrinking because everything has to change. So the world has a view of who Nelson Mandela is. But I feel his legacy is well printed, well documented, and well appreciated. Overseas, in South Africa, he was used by the ANC in various stages of his professional life, to the degree, which was sad to me, to see how an old man had to attend these rallies, which was very sad. And then later on, to hear from a public view that a great number of young people regarding as a seller, which is humbling to me. But that's the thing. The highest trees, the people on the highest levels, they get the greatest criticism. So, but he was a great man, and maybe I'm going to say something that it potentially is very controversial. Many people believe we should have wiped it. There should have been a revolution, and just cleaned it. A revolution, when the ANC took over, so that the country could could be rebuilt by a group of people who then see themselves as one. Because the way we did it was a handover. We shake hands, you hand over. Yeah, and then suddenly the handover wasn't good enough. We want more, we want more. The entitlement element, yeah.
What's your take on the argument that reverse apartheid is justifiable as a form of restitution?
Um, it's emotional. It's an emotional stance. Uh, Emotions has no place in leadership, nor does it have in business. If an emotional stance is preferred, um, and there is no understanding of what the alternatives are, it's a lost opportunity. Um, and the consequences will repeat itself. Because it has shown you how the universe deals with certain actions. So it's just going to repeat itself. And so if you wanted to intervene with such uh, consequences, you needed to develop a set of concrete alternatives through whatever means you had to. But by doing that, you are reducing the risk that you would embark on a process that's driven by your own emotions. So reversed apartheid is actually just cold-blooded emotions for which the consequences are the same because the formula is the same. You can't apply the same formula and then expect a different result.
How do you address claims that your criticism of the ANC aligns with white supremacist narratives?
Firstly, I don't judge people according to their skin color. Um, for me, if I look at the South African, I don't say in my heart he's white, he's Indian, and he's black. I see a South African. I judge people in accordance to their behavior, their decisions, and their life, not because how they look. The ANCs are unfortunately guilty. I didn't tell them to do it. They did it themselves. They created a law called broad-based black empowerment, which rates people based on ranks, based on their skin color. It puts black people at the top. It doesn't unfortunately. It doesn't mean that black people are rich. I'm just saying, if you are a person with an understanding of life, you would know that excess is greater than being rich. And so, but it gives access based on a ranking system. That is followed by black, colored, and Indian and white people. I'm a colored man. I said it before. I represent the cultural group. Indian people, they're not they Indian in reference to how they look, but they're South Africans. I mean, I speak to my friends from India. I'm more friends with the people from India than the local Indians because they identify more with me because they look and feel me and how I am as a human being. Because these Indian people in South Africa are South Africans. And so that's the first thing. I am not judging the ANC. I'm showing you what they did. I'm telling you what they did. I'm telling you that there was an alternative. And I'm telling you that it was all based on immediate gratification and selling entitlement to the poor. Now, the ANC brought very intelligent people to write the Constitution. They could have brought very intelligent people to write and share with them what the alternatives are and what the best socio-economic alternatives are for a United Nations. For a United Nation, they didn't. They followed their feelings, although they said they forgave the white man. Um, the when there was during the inception of COVID, when the world went crazy and South Africa went on a spree to raise more global funding in the form of loans. Uh, we have a substantial uh, loan element connected to the coffers of government. The interest on it is it's ridiculous. If they declared COVID an emergency. Now, if I had to be President Cyril Ramaphosa, uh, he had nothing immediate to gain. Um, he's declared a billionaire in many ways. I'm not sure if it's in dollars, but yeah, he's a billionaire in dollar terms. If he had understood what needed to be done, and he would have done it, he would have declared poverty an emergency. Because if you declare something of a passing nature, an emergency like COVID, it's fine because it has an immediate impact. Are you then saying that you're okay with the consequences of poverty if you don't declare it an emergency? So you choose which consequences you're comfortable to deal with as a very rich man. That for me, I think is very sad. It's very sad for us as ordinary South Africans. That under Cyril Ramaphosa, who had nothing to lose but to birth the nation that he could be proud of and leave a remarkable legacy. He had it all. He didn't need to chase after money, but he lost out on the opportunity. Instead, went to represent Palestine in a fight against Israel, which just shows you once again the call of the people in Khayelitsha, the call of the people in my communities, in the colored communities, in the Indian communities, ignored for pure sensationalism, and yet uh, we have such great opportunity, although it's shrinking and it's shrinking very fast. You have new countries, new powerhouses coming onto the scene. You have Rwanda. You have they stay stable enough. You have Nairobi. You have uh, Nigeria now, the biggest economy in Africa. I mean, we still play a great part because we remain a very stable economy with systems and so on. But those systems were developed by the same people whom you say you don't like. So if you make them feel at home and you sell a sentiment of united empowerment, man, you'll find that South Africa would have its own Silicon Valley. But you're making people feel like they don't belong, and so you neutralize and humble their new creativity. And a human being without a creative mindset will die poor.
Okay. Is there a place for race based policies in a truly equitable society?
No, if you need race-based laws, policy, yes, policies that need integrated integrated cultural, acceptable cultural norms, integrated policy, uh, standalone uh, cultural norms in a society where there's multiple cultures, it means that you didn't do your work. You were lazy. You ignored the rest. So if your cultural norms rule over others, then you have an unhappy society. You can't tell me which church I must go to or which language I must speak if you accepted the language. Yeah. So race-based policies must be, the law must be integrated and agreed. Integrated norms. But you can't have race-based laws based on discrimination and prejudice. You are interfering with people's human rights. You may feel a certain way, but you're creating another problem. You are interfering with people's human rights.
Okay. What responsibility do white South Africans hold in today's socio-economic climate?
I think one of the key elements of leaving your legacy is to have a sense of generosity. But generosity cannot be imposed. You can motivate people to be generous. And I think that's a very important thing. Because we have entered a space in which the rich or the wealthy feel they need to protect themselves. And so the generosity is not free flowing. I think white people, they've had decades of advancement that we can't lay claim to. I think they can certainly expedite the path to the same level of knowledge if they felt free. So the sentiment that allows or encourages people or motivates people of wealth to give back is compromised if they feel under attack by another cultural group. So now it's a matter of I'm staying here because the economy is good for me. I have generational wealth. I've got the West governing my stay here, not the local police. The West, because I'm plugged in. The world is now bigger than just South Africa. I'm plugged into the global system, so my wealth is kept safe. I'm kept safe as a family. But me, as a human being, as a white person, I suppose that's what a white man would feel. I'm not white. I'm just saying, if I were white, I would have said, I've tried to go to live in Holland. I come from Holland. My ancestors. I speak Afrikaans. It's not proper Dutch. They don't see me as Dutch, so I come quickly home. Or I'm not as rich as I am in England because I have to live in a flat. So when I come home, there's sunshine. I live in a mansion. I have 2 people cleaning my house, and so on. So the lifestyle, the environment is what I want. So I'm going to live here and be protected by the West and use black people, non-white people, to buy from me and keep me rich. Because they're not sparked by creativity. They don't create their own brands and businesses in which they buy from each other. They still buy from me. I'm not putting a gun against their heads. I never said don't. They have government power behind them. They have funding vehicles behind them. I never said don't build your own businesses. They are now following me freely, although they don't like me. And so I will go where I'm not liked by policy, but where I'm rich and my money is potentially spread across the world where I don't pay all the taxes I should, but I enjoy the sunlight and I live rich and I know whatever happens to me, uh, my grandfather in America or whoever will come and help me. So so that's the reality for a white person. He's evolved, I would imagine, because the world has evolved to be plugged. Obviously, he's leading on that front. He's creating new businesses, high tech businesses. It's part of the AI lifestyle. Uh, he- and so you still struggling and shackled, and you still believe you must live in a 10 hours because affirmative action told you you have a sense of entitlement. The alternative to affirmative action is to empower people so that they have enough belief in their own creativity for them to indicate what their talents are and to support those talents and give them access to that talent to create a new life for them and their generations to come. It does not have to happen today. Wealth is built over time. Sustainable wealth is built over time. I read somewhere in, like I said, I'm a Christian in a book the other day. It says that in the first 3 days, years, don't eat of your land. Let it be. In the fourth year, learn to share. In the fifth year, you can start it. So one of the great things, greatest errors of affirmative action is that every strong mindset is built on an anchoring which includes their faith and their family. Even if they don't have faith, I don't believe in anything, but I believe in this. There must be something, whether you create it yourself. And so one of the greatest shortfalls of the policy of affirmative action in this bill is based on immediate gratification. The philosophies of any stabling faith or belief was removed from the schools. You have a generation of young people, non-white people, who don't care for anything but vanity. Or the sentiment that was passed on by leadership to the next generation is immediate gratification and vanity. Yeah, so that's how I feel.
Okay, next question. What lessons from your journey can be applied to other nations facing systemic inequalities?
I think each nation across the world has its own form of prejudice, whether it's legalized or community based. I, for me, the the greatest sin and impact that these views have on the lives of the collective community is that it slows down progression as a unity. As a by default creates a judgment system, hierarchical system in which others rule over others. So the unity is by default under attack. There's infights, and the greatest nations on earth, the leading nations, they are progressing forward because in the unity there's a leadership sentiment of unity. And so we may not like each other, but as we stand together. And so that for me, if any society across the world allows feelings and sentiments of prejudice one against the other to prevail um, in their in their values and in the way they conduct themselves. The greatest loss would be progression and sustainable wealth creation.
How can South Africa achieve genuine unity and equality in the future?
Firstly, I think it's to accept that black-based, black economic empowerment must be eliminated and eliminated without any further consideration. I think there must be a process, and Nelson Mandela did suggest this. There must be a process of healing because the divide is so huge now. And that process of healing must be understood. It's not going to be a rugby match. Under Nelson Mandela, a rugby match was good enough. And the Americans went and made a movie. In fact, I'm not sure if the American actor with the same hairstyle as mine was, what's his name again? I forgot. But it's not good enough. It's not good enough. This time the healing would need to be based on we know each other. We know how bad we are. But let's find out how good we can be together. And but affirmative action, which is the new apartheid in South Africa, must be eliminated because it rules over the flow of the economy, the flow of funding, the flow of access. Based on this hierarchical reality which is in place, it by default presses the minorities to work harder and to find other creative solutions to feed their families. And even if they do so, even if they find ways, it's wrong. The effort that they put into finding ways could be put into nation building. And that could put South Africa in a position where it edges, where it competes so well that every family earns a living wage. And every family is inspired to carve out a path for their children, not through a process of or sentiment of entitlement, but one which is based on hard work, vision, dreaming, taking risks, and continuous self-improvement. Those are they once called it the American dream. It's based on the same principle that there's access. You need to align yourself and those who are close to you to the opportunity. But the opportunity is there for everybody. When the opportunity is only given to a few, and that same thing happened to those who are insisting to repeat it, and they saw the consequences, and they now apply it on others, then they crook, and they corrupt, and they are cheats, and they are not leaders, and they don't care enough. They don't love enough. They are guilty of vanity. Don't they know? Legacies are built on the principle of generosity, empowering others, not only your family, but others. So if you live and you only want to empower yourself and potentially your own family, then you are a narcissist. You are of no good to society. Whether you call yourself a politician, an academic, a billionaire, or poor, if you don't believe in the advancement of humanity as a whole, and you sit in leadership, you must go to school and excuse yourself and come back later when you have the skills.
What is your message to the younger generation growing up in post apartheid South Africa?
First thing is live, find out who you are and what your talents are, and use the greater opportunity to explore that talent. Don't look to what only your eyes can see. Pursue something that's far greater. And if you don't see it, work hard until you feel it, until you see it. Don't waste your time on living a narrative to defeat the circumstance that you see. It's you have to contribute, but from a perspective where you have found the best of you. You know, they say what makes, obviously these guys are amazing, man. They have skills, but what makes not Ronaldo and Messi better players than others? Why do they score all these goals and things? Is because when they see the polls, they become selfish, and they know they're going to score the goal. They know when to pass and when they must go because they understand themselves. So before you want to pass, go find yourself in this global context. After you know who you are, you can come and help from a perspective where you achieve your best. Don't waste your time fighting circumstance. The universe is going to deal with it by itself anyway, if you understand it.
If you could change one law or policy today, what would it be and why?
I would make a law against poverty. I would put a ministerial department against poverty and prejudice. And I would fight it in all its forms and shapes. And why I would do it here, because it's relevant. Management needs to be relevant to the conditions on the ground. Management needs to be relevant to the vision that you aspire to achieve. Your structure needs to appreciate those things. How are you existing in an environment where 80% of your community suffers from poverty, but you don't have a process that deals with poverty? In fact, you're finding alternative methods which are based on sensationalism, self-enrichment, and emotion to preach to those a sense of entitlement. I don't know how it actually works, to be honest, because I mean, I'm a very sensitive person. Nobody's going to come and tell me that, but this is going to happen to you if you sign a form or if you vote for the ANC. It can't be, because I know myself first. And so that's the sad thing, that you would marginalize the illiterate for your own gain. So I would put into prison those that keep the people poor. I will lock them up. I don't. Donald Trump, he came into power a few days ago, and he did a few things. He said a few things about South Africa. In fact, he said Africa is a shithole. In the previous time, he was the there are things that you like. There are things that you don't like. There are other elements of leaders like communist leaders or whatever that you potentially would think, is he trying to be like them or whatever you think. But what you don't have to think about, he's direct and he goes for the things that he thinks is a problem, which he considers to be a problem. Now, I ask myself, if you are a billionaire and you grow up poor, you know the difference between rich and wealth and poor and rich. And then poor and poor and dirt poor. I don't know if you know that. You have it in India. I mean, there are even levels to poverty. You know, it's ridiculous. It's firstly, I mean, we were told that the poor will be with us forever. Yeah, the poor will be with us forever. But then we were also told that we need to care for them. We have a responsibility because we were blessed with sight beyond what the eyes can see, potentially, if we didn't corrupt the system to get into leadership. It's a calling. And when you embrace that calling, you appreciate there are levels to poverty. Some people don't have running water. Some are in villages. Some are rich, poor in urban areas. Some are homeless. Some are mentally challenged because of their poverty. I don't want to go into all of it. It's a third world country. We know a lot of these things. But uh, man, am I disappointed to know that a man who didn't grow up with a father with a Rolls Royce and who's the bigger part of his community, potentially his family, some of his family members are poor, would come into power and not declare the shackles of poverty to be an emergency. He got nothing to lose. If you have nothing to lose, you have creativity to give. Otherwise, what are you doing? I don't know. I need to. What are you doing? So that's just my view.
What do you hope readers take away from Apartheid of the Heart?
Firstly, I wrote a poem in the book. It's called Pilot Paul. In the poem, I write that Pilot Paul, would you take me away to a place where race-based policy will not be part of my day again? But I also write, never again will I trust another man. And I also write that the color of money is black, blue, and gold. And what I want people to take away from reading the book, because it tells my own story. I want them to know that mankind in its most difficult situations has the natural ability to make life. Because I grew up in apartheid environment. It didn't take away from me aspiring to make a better person of myself. And I certainly didn't look left, right. I just looked forward and I'm completing the day in which I found myself. So I think firstly, the first learning is that no matter where you find yourself, is you can become who you want to be. Um, the second thing I want people to know is humans have alternatives in their decision-making process. They weigh up options. And the greatest factor in the decision-making process, or whoever has to make that decision, is an alignment to the person himself, whether good or bad, whatever orientation he follows. And just because you know somebody who looks like you may not share your orientation. And so when you live your life, um, you must anchor yourself to something far greater than the human that you see in front of you, and your belief system must be of such that your circumstances are of a passing nature, and you should pursue the best person in yourself, because you too are black and white. You too are good and bad. And so I think that's important. I do think from two perspectives here. The one is um, by understanding that cultural prejudice is a tangible element in the way of life of any country, is the ability to slow down the sentiment of unity and the progression of that particular nation. I think cultural prosperity or cultural issues in a corporate company have the same effect. Um, if the people within that organization do not aspire uh, to a unified set of rules, they will not be able to take the company forward and pursue what's best for that organization. Um, I also think the I'm trying to show um, in my writing that the home that you have, whether it was based on a community that was oppressed, is a home that formed you, and it's the home that you refer to throughout your life. And as much as I talk about the responsibility of leaders um, to give equal access to all who live in a particular country, there's also a responsibility that I'm trying to express, that your circumstance should not make you a lesser human being, because the children and the family that you uh, take or encourage to go into the world, they'll rest on that experience in their home, whether they were able to eat the best of bread or or they had to go sleep alone. The sentiment of unity is by far exceeds the passing pains of hunger. So I I I hope I instill in management an ability to process difficult periods of time in their businesses, and I hope I instill in leaders a sense of responsibility that would lead them to find elements that make them anchor as humans, so that they can anchor on something good, so that they can do more than just self-enrichment. And I hope I anchor in future generations a mindset that says to them, your future is not based on where you come from. Yeah, I think that's what I try to achieve.
So, my last final bonus question would be, how can readers connect with you and reach you?
Well, at the moment, I can be reached through my social pages, which is Instagram, um, and Facebook and LinkedIn. Those are my preferred choices. Um, yeah, and I'm happy to discuss um, processes that will lead to better consideration and thinking and decision making. when it comes to the impact of prejudice and cultural challenges on participation in business in the world. Um, my mindset is one of, and has always been, I I can do whatever I want to do, and no apartheid, no black or no white government will tell me where I'm going to end up. And if people come to me and they want to talk to me about robust um, policies or processes that will make them achieve or enable them to achieve the best that they can be in their jobs or as leaders in their companies, if they want me to help them develop strategies that will help them to get there, I'm more than keen. And I'll be touring on an intercontinental path with the work that we created that's linked to these cultural elements and the risk that they pose on people's futures and the future of us as a society, as global citizens, and as a global unity. Yeah.
Thank you for joining the interview, Dr. Quinton.
Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed learning about the remarkable experiences and insights of Dr. Quinton W. Simpson. If you are inspired by his journey, don't miss out on ordering your copy of Apartheid of the Heart today. Thank you for tuning in, and remember to share this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories and discussions. Until next time.